Shalom, back again with another lesson. And before I begin this lesson, I'd like to first begin by giving all honor, glory, and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Recha Kodash. I want to give double honors to my elders and apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone who rule well, where I've learned this truth from. I want to say peace and salutations to Yakim, you brothers out there laboring, pushing his word out in all truth and in sincerity, presenting your bodies as a living sacrifice, which is your reasonable service. I want to say shalom to you Akwath, meaning you Israelite sisters that may be listening, and also want to say shalom to you Israelites that are scattered across the four corners of the earth. You may look like these other nations, but your seed line goes back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is the chosen seed line. Shalom. So I'm at the plantation. I managed to get a little bit of spare time just to do a quick lesson. So I wanted to do this lesson on putting on the whole armor of the Most High, right? So as you can see in the title, it says the armor of the Most High. So we're going to read in the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, and we're going to start from verse 10. We're just going to talk about putting on the whole armor because the days that we're coming into, or getting ready to come into, is going to be a dark time period, right? It's going to be a really dark time, a lot of chaos, a lot of things that are happening in the earth. So we need to prepare ourselves and make sure that we're protected in these times, right? So this is the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 10. It says, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might," right? So we want to let our strength, or let your strength, lay with the Lord by having faith, having the understanding, and also believing in the ability of his power, right? Because the Lord, there's none above him, right? And he's here to protect his remnant, the elect of Israel, right? So we need to have the faith and walk that the Lord, believing in the Lord and his power, that he's going to deliver us through this period that we're about to go through, right? So this is verse 11. It says, "Put on the whole armor of the Most High, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil," right? Now, the wiles of the devil is the trickery of the devil in this ministry. Because the devil, right, the deceiver, is going to try everything or throw everything at you to try and move you off your square, meaning to throw you off, following this truth and believing and, to get you to go off. That's what the devil's job is to do, is to throw you off from following the Lord, right? So, he's going to come at you in all kinds of ways. He may come at you through your family. He may come through your relationships. You may get tested at your job. There's multiple things that, this devil can throw at you, like this trickery that he's going to send your way, right? Now, when you read in the book of, in the Apocrypha, in the book of Ecclesiasticus, we're going to read chapter 2. We're going to read from the top, verse 1. And it says, "My son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation," right? So when you wake up to this truth and you start following in the ways of the scriptures, trying to keep the commandments to the best of your abilities, understanding the breakdowns, all of these things, right? You're going to be put in through temptations, right? You're going to be put through trials, right? So as we keep reading in Ecclesiasticus, chapter 2, verse 2, it says, "Set thy heart aright and constantly endure, and make not haste in time of trouble." So when it says set thy heart aright, that means to set your mind aright. Get your mind in order. Constantly endure. So when you're going through these fiery trials, these temptations, like sometimes it can get a bit heavy on your spirit. You can be stressed out. You're going through all these things, but it says, "Make not haste in time of trouble." So don't be so quick to throw in a towel when you're going through something, right? When you're being, persecuted at your job, or, your family's coming up against you, whatever the case may be. Your family's saying that, oh, you've joined a cult, or whatever the case may be. It says, "Make not haste in time of trouble." So don't be so quick to throw in the towel and say, okay, yeah, I'm not dealing with that anymore. You know what I mean? Verse 3, it says, "Cleave unto him," and the him is the Most High. Yeah, so cleave unto him and depart not away, that thou mayest be increased at thy last end, right? And many brothers have testimonies about the times where they were going through something heavy, right? But they still continue to study, bring out the word, go on the highways and hedges and try and reach, the Israelites that are, scattered abroad, reach out to the Israelites, the hopeful elect. And they've been going through these troubles, and at the end of the day, the Lord has increased them at the end, and now they're in much better positions than what they currently were. You see, because the Lord will increase them at the last end, because it could be a trial that the Lord is putting you through. You never know. It could be the fact that the Lord's like, all right, I can see this is one of my servants. Let me move him out of this position and put him in this position. But he's going to go through these trials beforehand. And I just want to see if he's actually about what he says he's about. You know what I mean? If he says he's down for the Lord, let's see. So in verse 4, it says, whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully, and be patient when thou art changed to a lower state. So for an example, when you're at work, you may have a supervisor that's just on your case constantly, right? Maybe giving you the worst assignments, maybe getting you to do the worst jobs, right? It says, whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully, meaning don't be, quick to jump down your supervisor's throat, because he could be using that as an excuse to try and get you out of there. You have to hold your temper. Just look, take cheerfully. Yeah, all right, whatever, man, whatever, I'll do it. It says, be patient when thou art changed to a lower state. When you're going through something, just deal with it, man. I know it's hard working on the plantation sometimes, and you got to deal with unnecessary issues at work. But just deal with it, right? Just you got this, right? Be patient when thou art changed to a lower state, and there's a reason why. Right, so in verse 5, it says, for gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity, right? So gold, if you look at the process of gold and how they refine gold, it goes through that fire process. They put it through the liquid, they melt it down, and they do that to get rid of the impurities, right? So make it that 100% gold, right? And that's what the Lord is doing. The Lord is putting you through, the furnace, the fire, and he's making you better. He's making you more pure, because when you go through certain events, it builds character. It builds, it makes you stronger. You see, so you can say, well, yeah, they put me through all that crap, but I came out stronger. Now look at me. I can deal with these certain things. You know what I mean? And the Lord may be doing that to prepare you for something later on that you may have to face, right? So I'll read that again. This is Ecclesiasticus chapter 2, verse 5. It says, for gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. So acceptable, people can deal with that. When somebody puts something on your shoulders, the Lord knows what you can handle and what you can't handle. And that goes to both men and women, right? That are in this truth, you see? So the Lord's going to put you through it just to test, to see if you're, if you're strong enough to deal with it, or if you're so quick to throw in the towel, So as we continue in verse 6, this is Ecclesiasticus chapter 2, verse 6, it says, believe in him, and he will help thee. Order thy way aright, and trust in him. So there you have it, you see? You believe in the Most High, right? You keep the faith, yeah, because that's what you're relying on, is the faith that the Lord's going to help you through it. It says, believe in him, and he will help thee. Order thy way aright, and trust in him. So when you order your way aright, you're learning the commandments and statutes and keeping them to the best of your ability. So you're ordering your way aright. So now you're not doing wickedness. You're not partaking in things that the Lord don't please in. You're ordering your way aright. You're ordering your steps. You're keeping the high holy days. You're keeping the Sabbaths. You're studying the scriptures. You're getting the understanding. You're learning the information, right? You're learning the truth, the 100% truth. And then you put your trust in him, meaning you believe in him, right? You put your trust in the Lord. Verse 7, it says, ye that fear the Lord. And who are the ones that fear the Lord? The ones that trust in the Lord. People say, oh yeah, I believe in the Lord, but they don't fear him. You fear the Lord that, hey, if I don't, do exactly what the Lord has commanded me of, the Lord's going to leave me out there to deal with this on my own instead of helping me, right? But it says, ye that fear the Lord, right? Wait for his mercy, and go not aside lest ye fall, right? So again, there's another point. It says, ye that fear the Lord, which is talking to the Israelites that are in this truth, Wait for his mercy. So don't be expecting the Lord to just instantly answer your prayer. So if you make a prayer like, oh Lord, this supervisor is on my case, can you just uh, either put me in a better position, put me in a better job, or do something for me? People expect it to be like instant, like, oh yeah, as soon as you make the prayer, now there's an announcement over the radio to say, oh yeah, such and such, you've now been promoted to regional manager. It doesn't work like that, right? So it works as ye that fear the Lord, wait for his mercy. You have to wait on the Lord, right? Because the Lord's going to do something behind the scenes that you may not even be aware that he's doing, that's preparing you for something better. And as I mentioned, there are a lot of brothers out there that have testimonies where they were in bad positions, and because they trusted and waited on the mercy of the Lord, they're now in better positions, doing much better than where they were, you see? But it says, ye that fear the Lord, wait for his mercy, and go not aside lest ye fall, right? So if you're going through these trials, these tribulations, these hardships, and you throw in the towel, it says, go not aside lest you fall. You will fall, basically. Meaning if you throw in the towel, you're gonna have to deal with, whatever, comes your way after that. You know what I mean? So as we continue in verse 8, it says, ye that fear the Lord, believe him, and your reward shall not fail, right? And the Lord is not a liar. You see, so the Lord says, you'll be rewarded for trusting in him and believing in him. Believe that. The Lord says his reward, your reward shall not fail. You see? So I'm going to read on verse 9. It says, ye that fear the Lord, hope for good and for everlasting joy and mercy. And that was the main goal, is we're fighting to receive um, the kingdom. The kingdom is the ultimate goal, and that's what we're striving to, right? So we do the best that we can. We hope for the best, but we strive for that everlasting joy and mercy, and that's what we want. See? So yeah, I'll read verse 10, and then we'll go back to Ephesians 6. It says, this is Ecclesiasticus chapter 2, verse 10. It says, look at the generations of old and see, did ever any trust in the Lord and was confounded? Did any abide in his fear and was forsaken? Or whom did he ever despise that called upon him? See, and this is all rhetorical because, none. When the Israelites were in bad positions, they cried out to the Lord. What happened? The Lord raised up, someone to deliver the Israelites out of their hardships. Look at Egypt, for example. The Lord raised up Moses, and we got led into the land, of milk and honey. You see, even though we were complaining and doing all the idolatry and all that other stuff in the wilderness, the Lord punished us for that. But every time that we were in bad shape, we cried out to the Lord, and he delivered us. You see, the Lord had mercy upon us. So it's saying, look at the generations of old, and where can you find an example where the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and the Lord was like, nah, forget that, I ain't helping you. Even during the time of Babylon, when he turned his back on us, he still came and delivered us out of captivity. You see, but back to Ephesians chapter 6, right? We're gonna read verse 12. It says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Right? So, Apostle Paul is saying ultimately that in this walk, in this truth, spirits on the left-hand side are going to jump on people to come up against you, right? So, when I mentioned the supervisor at work because obviously that's a good example. And a lot of people do face these type of people at their jobs. You know what I mean? You have the supervisor that's just constantly on your back. That could be a spirit on the left-hand side that's jumped on this supervisor's just come at you because the Lord is seeing you. And remember what it said in Ecclesiasticus chapter 2 from verse 1. It says, my son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation. You see? So when you're looking at the flesh, these spirits jumping on, these other people, like even in your relationships, for you men, the spirit on the left hand side could jump on your woman, and the woman now turns into, this demon that you can't even, relate to anymore. Now a lot of brothers have falling out of the truth over their woman, Then there's many stories in the scriptures that talk about, give not thy strength unto women, right? Roughly paraphrasing, but that happens, you see. But Paul is saying that in this walk, and it also says in Ecclesiasticus, you come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation. You're going to go through it. So verse 13, it says, wherefore take unto you the whole armor of the Most High, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand, right? Because the evil times are coming, right? The evil days are coming. We can see it. The writing is on the wall, You got the threat of these race riots getting ready to kick off at any point. You got the World War III getting ready to kick off. Iran just announced that they're trying to get hold of a nuke. If they haven't already received one or got one, obtained one. That's the word I was looking for. Obtained a nuke. These evil days are coming. Everything that the Bible has warned us about is getting ready to happen. You see. So in the evil day, you want to make sure that you have the whole armor of the Most High, so you'll be ready for any eventuality that comes your way, right? Because these trials are going to continue to come. The Lord's getting ready to test everybody, but only the remnant, the elect of Israel, are going to make it through. The Lord's going to have, that covering over. So that's why we got to make sure we have the whole armor of the Most High, right? So in verse 14, it says, stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having the breastplate of righteousness. So Paul likens the truth, as a girdle. Like, you're looking at armor. A girdle is like an undersuit that you put on, right? It's like an undersuit that allows you to carry that heavy armor. It's like an undersuit for that heavy armor, right? So Paul likens the truth as a girdle. It says, having the breastplate, right? So when you strive for righteousness, right? The breastplate of righteousness is when you strive for the righteousness. So when you learn the commandments, right, you try to keep them to the best of your ability. So you don't sit there and you can't keep the law 100%, right? You can't keep it 100%. And anybody that tells you they can is not being truthful, right? Because you can't keep the law 100%, but you strive and you try the best of your ability to keep the laws, statutes, and commandments, right? So verse 14, it says, stand therefore, having your loins girt about with the truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, right? So Paul is likening, this truth as, armor, right? So you have the girdle, which a girdle is like, an undersuit. So when you're putting on the armor, you don't just put on the heavy armor. You have like an undersuit that helps you to makes it more comfortable for you to have the armor on, right? So Paul likens the truth as a girdle, right? Now, when you strive for righteousness, that's like keeping the law, statutes, and commandments to the best of your abilities. Although we do understand you can't keep the law perfectly, but you strive and you try your utmost, utmost sincerity to keep the law to the best of your ability. That's like putting on the righteousness of the breastplate of armor. You see? That's like the breastplate. Now, as we continue on in verse 15, it says, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. See? So the gospel of peace is what you would use as part of the armor that you put around your feet, which your feet carry you where you go, wherever you go, right? So you want to be wrapped in that gospel which carries you everywhere, right? And this is why Paul is likening this truth to putting on the whole armor of the Most High. These things, right? The gospel, the righteousness, the truth, right? When we get to verse 16, it says, above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, right? So the shield, which represents the faith, this allows you to block the fiery darts, which are these trials, these tribulations that you go through. The fiery darts of the wicked is these trials that they're throwing at you, all this stress and pressure that they're putting on you to try and knock you off your square, right? Verse 17, it says, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of the Most High, right? Now, the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of the Most High. The helmet of salvation protects the knowledge that you have, right? That you've learned. So when you're in this truth and, under the head apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone and the like-minded brothers on down that's teaching in all truth and sincerity, you get the true understanding and knowledge. So when Christians come up to you and they try to battle you, those Christians could have spirits on them. That's why they come up to you and they say the same talking points, even though we've explained it multiple times to them. And they just can't get it because them spirits don't want them to hear. So they just keep coming up to you. You Israelites are racist, but we understand it in the scriptures. We're not making anything up. We're bringing everything out through the scriptures. And that's why it says, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of the Most High, right? So that sword is these scriptures. That's how we battle them, right? These Christians come up and they just start telling you that the Gentiles can be grafted in and all that stuff. You can just go to the scriptures and bring out the precepts that cut everything they're saying. You see? Because the sword is a defensive weapon, and our scriptures are our defense against these spiritual wickedness in high places, right? That Christianity has a stronghold on our people. And a lot of Christians are now starting to wake up to the fact that they're Israelites, and that a lot of the stuff that we're saying, they cannot be, debunked unless they choose to be blind, choose to be ignorant, which is what they tend to do quite often, But we're going to continue on, right? So this is verse 18. It says, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints, right? So, praying constantly is something that we always mention. You got to pray constantly praying. Pray to the Lord, right? Create that relationship with the Lord. Speak to him, tell him you put all your burdens upon the Lord. Let the Lord know what's going on with you. You got to keep it consistent, praying consistently, right? Now, to preserve, right? Because it says perseverance, right? To preserve is to continue to fight through the trials, right? Endure. You got to endure everything that you're going through. When you're brought to the lowest state, you got to endure. You got to fight through it. See? Now, fasting, that also helps. Prayer and fasting, right? Making supplications, right? That's the act of asking for something earnestly and humbly. You're praying for your brothers, right? Because it says here, perseverance and supplications for all saints. So you're praying for your brothers and you're praying for your sisters, right? Praying, that if they're going through these trials, like Lord, I pray that you have mercy upon this brother or on this sister, help them through the troubled times. That's an honorable thing, is to pray for your brothers and sisters, right? So when we read in verse 19, it says, and for me, that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel. You see? So we're praying for the saints, which are the Israelite men. We're praying for them that they may be able to continue to preach the word boldly, and preach the gospel, and do the lessons, right? Out in our highways and hedges, pray for them, pray for their safety, right? That they can continue to preach the word of the Lord boldly. You know what I mean? So that's what we pray for. That's a good thing. That's why we say that the time is close, where we're getting ready to enter into some dark days, right? So we got to pray for our brothers and sisters, right? The ones that are in this truth. We got to pray for them, right? So that's the why we say it's important that you put on the whole armor of the Most High, right? Because you can see how it's likened to you get the truth, which is the girdle, the righteousness, which is the breastplate, keeping the commandments to the best of your ability, the gospel, right? Right here, the gospel, which covereth your feet and carries you wherever you may go. You have the gospel with you. You have the truth, right? You have the faith, right, which is the shield of faith, You know, you have the helmet of salvation, so you're protecting your mind from these false doctrines that these Christians throw at you, right? These false understandings, right? The sword of the Spirit. See, the whole armor. You've got all these things that you can use to protect you against all the things that these devils throw at you, right? Through their trickery, the wiles of the devil, right? And these left-handed spirits jumping on these people to come at you and try and stress you out and knock you off your pivot and you know, cause you to cast it all away, throw in the towel, right? So I'm going to leave it there, right? Because I just wanted to sort of touch on those points. So I pray that this lesson was edifying through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai. Double honors to my elders and apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone, who rule well, where I've learned this truth from. I want to say peace and salutations to you hopeful elect out there that have been listening. It's on to the next lesson, Lord willing. Shalom.